Are you ready to increase your retention and revenue and convert website traffic to clients? Then you're ready for Maya. Maya is a marketing and client recruitment software. Maya creates better business relationships by pairing the right clients with the right beauty professionals. How do we do it? A matchmaker. Your brand will have its own unique matchmaking survey. By pairing people based on their skill set, budget, personality, and lifestyle preferences, Maya creates lasting relationships that keep both sides coming back for more. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. Pair the right clients with the right beauty pros the first time. Visit joinmaya.com to get started.
Thank you for joining me. This is Katie Whitledge with the Beyond the Technique podcast. Man, I'm excited. We have a first-time guest, Antony Whitaker, here. And you are going to love him. We are talking about onboarding new talent. Do you have a plan? Are you confident in your plan? Are the people you hire confident about your plan? Man, we're going to dive into this much needed topic today. But first, let me tell you about Antony. He is an entrepreneur, educator, motivator, and truth teller to salons worldwide. As a thought leader with more than 40 years experience at the top of the industry, Antony is renowned for giving down-to-earth, practical, and inspiring advice on running a modern, successful salon. He is a former creative director at Vidal Sassoon, best-selling author, online course creator, and twice named Australian Hairdresser of the Year. His Grow My Salon Business podcast attracts subscribers from more than 70 countries. Yes, we've landed him here on Beyond the Technique. I'm so excited. Without further ado, help me welcome Antony Whitaker. Welcome to Beyond the Technique.
Katie, it's great to be here. It's a real privilege. I've listened to your podcast on and off over the years. And so it's great to finally be here on the other side of the mic. So yeah, looking forward to it. Did you like that bit about truth teller? Someone else called me the truth teller. And I thought at the time, actually, that's something I like to really hang my hat on. And I said to them, why do you call me the truth teller? They said, well, you don't pull any punches. You just tell how it is. And yeah, I suppose I do. And I don't really apologize for that. I think it's important to be truthful and not to dress it up and to be a bit of a straight shooter. So yeah.
I think it's a sign of somebody that really cares. You know, I watched on social media this thing that said, don't trust the people who, when you're not doing great, they still hype you up and tell you you're just fine. You know, you got to trust the people who are, when you're not doing great, they call you out for it because they actually care that much. They're going to say, hey, buddy, this isn't
Exactly.
the way it should be. You know, so
Exactly.
I appreciate that about you, Antony. And I appreciate just all you've done for this industry. You are an incredible person. So I'm so grateful that you're here. I want to kind of go back to the very beginning because 40 years in the industry is quite some time. Tell us, why did you decide to get into the beauty industry and kind of where did it start for you?
It's well, as you sort of said in the intro, I've sort of lived in different countries. So I was born in New Zealand. I grew up there. Then I moved to England in the 80s. And so I lived in England for 10 years. Then I moved to Australia, lived there for 12 years. And then I moved back to England. And I've been living back in the UK since, well, for the last 20 odd years now. So this is definitely home. But I started hairdressing in New Zealand. And there was no great master plan about it. I didn't have any great love affair with being a hairdresser. To be really honest with you, before I was a hairdresser, I used to work on construction sites as a builder's laborer. And so the segue from that into hairdressing is not obvious, but there was a friend of mine, well, he was a friend of my brother's who was a few years older than me. I knew him at school and he had opened a barbershop. And this was in the 70s, and it was sort of the beginning of what they called the unisex hairdressing era. And hairdressing was really sexy at that point in time. You know, there was some great movies. There was a movie with Warren Beatty called Shampoo that came out. And I think there was a whole generation of young men that were sort of, you know, influenced by this idea of this sexy career path. that hairdressing potentially offered. And I looked at my friend who'd opened up this barbershop, and it was really the first sort of unisex salon in town. And I thought, I want some of that. So I went from being a builder's laborer on a construction site to getting an apprenticeship in a hairdressing salon. And I absolutely loved it. It was never anything that I would have thought that I'd end up doing, but it was just it never felt like work. It was the joy of the relationships with people and the experience that you were having, and listening to great music and having good conversations. It was just so much fun. And so I started that, and I really never looked back. And I started in 1978, and then in 1980 is when I decided I wanted to move to London because I wanted to work for Vidal Sassoon. And I mean, that's a long time ago, but I just knew that if I was going to do hairdressing, I wanted to be the best hairdresser I could possibly be. And definitely at that time, Sassoon was, at the very pinnacle of hairdressing, all around the world. Any magazine you picked up would feature, his work and stuff. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. That's where I wanted to be. So I moved to London, worked there for 10 years, and then eventually went on to open my own salons and schools in Australia before then, sort of concentrating on the education side of the industry and moving back to the UK, which is where I'm now based.
You say, oh, I moved to Australia and opened salons, plural, schools, plural, like no big deal. And then I did this. Wow, that's a huge, like, that is already takes so much courage to move from the UK then to Australia and be like, I'm going to just open up a bunch of businesses in an economy that I'm not used to, in a country, different rules, different thing. So tell me, what was that learning curve like? And, what did it take? It obviously, was it easier than what you think it could be like now? I mean, that's just incredible to me.
It's a steep learning curve, put it that way. I grew up in New Zealand, then moved to the UK, then back to Australia. They're similar countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're similar. New Zealand's much smaller. I suppose, Canadians hate it when you say this, that, if you confuse a Canadian with an American, they get really annoyed. But if you live in the UK or Australia, New Zealand, it's really easy to confuse Canadian accents with American accents. So it would be a little bit like if you were American and you went and worked in Canada. It wouldn't be totally foreign. There would be some degree of comfort.
Sure.
So moving between those countries, it wasn't that uncomfortable. And then, of course, the naivety of youth. I was in my 20s. The reason I moved to Australia from the UK was my wife was Australian. So, there was that sort of familiarity of family, and I'd visited there before. So, it wasn't that big a challenge. But then, the real challenge, no matter where you are in the world, is really making that transition, not from country to country, but from stylist to salon owner. And I think, and I will be the first one to put my hand up and say that I did that with total naivety. And I think that most people do. I think that most of us, we think, well, I'm good at doing hair and I work in a hairdressing business. It seems to be sort of easy enough. What could possibly go wrong? So we go and open up our own salons and then find out that quite a lot can go wrong. And so you either learn and learn fast, or you don't survive. And that was my journey, like everybody else's. And my background at Sassoon was mainly as an educator. So I worked in their salons and schools. And when I moved to Australia, I had some experience of being a salon-based hairdresser. But my real experience was in education. And so I opened a salon. It was small to start with. There was only 3 of us, but it grew very quickly. And it wasn't really through any great business acumen, but within 3 years, I had 3 salons, and one of them doubled up as a school. And I'm the first one to say that wasn't due to any great business acumen. It was sort of good fortune and opportunities that were presented to me. And I'm always a great believer that, sometimes, like, it's not a case of being lucky, but if opportunities are presented to you, you should grab them and then sort it out afterwards. And that's pretty much what I did. And it wasn't all smooth sailing, but I very quickly realized that, just because I was good at doing hair didn't mean I'd be good at running a hairdressing business, and that I had a lot to learn. And so I learned fast. And I've always been a good student and a passionate, learner. And then sort of from that, as an educator being on stage, and in my school, what I used to find was that people would ask me as many questions about business as they would about the haircut I was doing. And so the transition from talking about how to cut hair to how to build a business was this sort of gradual thing that it sort of just morphed from one thing into the other, based on the needs of people in the audience. I mean, I'm sure you know what it's like. I'm sure most of your audience do that. If you're demonstrating a haircut to someone, you'll often explain one half of it, and then you'll say, and now I'm going to do the same on the other side. And so you've sort of run out of stuff to talk about, and then someone would pipe up and ask a question like, how do you pay your people? Or, how do you get good results out of people when it comes to, average bill or upselling retail or rebooking? And so I just started by default talking about the business side of beauty. And bit by bit, that sort of has morphed into, what I now do full time. So yeah, I hope that's answered your question. I'm very aware I've sort of jumped from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. So please don't hesitate to go back.
Well, I think that it's interesting that, the business acumen didn't come naturally, per se. What helped you? You said you learn quickly. What helped you kind of get to a point where you felt confident and like, business now, this business well?
There were a few milestones. I think one of them for me was, right place, right time. There was a book that came out in the 80s. I think it came out in 1986, and it's still as relevant today as it was in 1986. It's a book called The E-Myth by a gentleman by the name of Michael Gerber.
I was going to guess that.
Oh, it's just the most, like for a non-business person, it is like it's like 101 of building a business for me. And Michael Gerber came to town and he was doing a seminar. And I don't know, I don't think I already had the book, but I'd heard about the seminar, so I went along to it. It was a business seminar, it wasn't a hairdressing event. And there was 300 or 400 people in the room. And I can remember just being completely mesmerized by this man. And I also remember in the coffee break, there was by fortune, another hairdresser there who came up to me. She recognized me and she said, are you Antony Whitaker? I said, yeah. I said, who are you? She said, oh, I'm so-and-so. I'm a hairdresser. I've got a salon in town or whatever. And she looked at me and she went, it's a bit of a waste of time today, isn't it? It's not really about hairdressing. And I couldn't believe that she'd said that. I couldn't believe that she couldn't see the parallels. I mean, the E-Myth is not talking about hairdressing. The E-Myth is talking about, a young woman who has a cookie shop. I mean, for our listeners, imagine like a Mrs. Fields cookies. Do you know what I mean? It was like the original cookie shop. And the E-Myth is really just a parable about, this mentor that teaches this young woman with the cookie shop about how she should be building her business. And the parallels to the hairdressing industry were just like phenomenal to me. And I couldn't believe that other people couldn't see them. So that to me was a real defining moment. And then there was another one, which I think because I was a creative, I used to think that business wasn't cool. The business, wasn't a creative thing. And I didn't want to be a suit. I wanted to be the creative guy that had a successful business. And I remember reading an interview with Andy Warhol. And Andy Warhol was an artist that sort of traversed many different sort of mediums of art. And the interviewer said something to him like, you do all these different art forms. Which art form is the most creative? And his answer, he said something like, I'm paraphrasing here. He said, yes, I do photography and I paint and I do mime or dance or whatever it was. But he said, the most creative art form is business. And he said, because when I take a photograph or do a painting, when it's done and it's finished. And it's either good or bad. But he said, with a business is always evolving and it always has to work. And it's such a creative process. And I can just remember hearing this or reading this and thinking, oh my God, building a business is a really cool thing to do. And it's a really creative thing to do. And it was sort of like it gave me license to be passionate about business. And so those two things that are, they're completely disconnected, but they happened about the same time. And it really made me recognize that, building a team, building a brand, creating a culture is like the next step to doing something cool with your hands in terms of doing hair. And it is every bit as creative and every bit as cool and a great thing to be doing. And that sort of, really set me off on this path, with a great deal of passion and enthusiasm for building businesses.
Oh man, I love that, Anthony. That is so cool. And for everybody listening, I'm gonna put a link in our show notes for you to check out the E-Myth. Because you know what? Even if it was written in the 80s, like he said, it's a parable. It's still applicable. It's not outdated in the way it's done. It's so smart. And I highly recommend everybody listening to
Definitely.
go get a copy. So thank you for that. And building a business is really cool. And now you kind of set yourself up to help so many salon owners run their business. You coach them, you consult with them. And one of the things that you're kind of noticing is this disconnect between bringing a new team member on and that onboarding process. So if we're going to onboard new talent, well, first off, let's talk about what's not working well. What are you noticing is going on in the industry that's not probably the way it should be or could be?
Well, everywhere in the world, everyone, I'm generalizing here, but if there was one thing that the world of hairdressing is talking about a lot, it is the recruitment issue, the challenge with finding and keeping, good team members. And, and like I say, that is a global issue. But what I really notice is that a lot of people aren't ready to recruit. They're not ready to employ people. They say that they are, but I think they're saying that they are based on an old map, meaning that what you used to do 10 years ago to recruit and what it meant to be ready 10 years ago just doesn't wash today. And so what I mean by that is, I mean, sometimes the lesson is, in the story, and we were talking about this a little bit before we pushed the record button, but, I had a coaching client of mine who was telling me about how he was having trouble with recruitment. And this wasn't someone in the US, but it translates no matter where you are. And anyway, he had a young lady who wanted to come and work for him, and she'd been in the industry for a year. She was doing an apprenticeship. She hadn't gone to beauty school, and she was doing an apprenticeship. And she was a year into that apprenticeship, and she contacted him and said, because she saw he was advertising for staff. So she contacted him and said, are you looking for, someone who's already got a little bit of experience to take them on as an apprentice? And he said, yeah, come on in and we'll have an interview. So anyway, this young lady rocks up for the interview and she's got her mum with her. And he said to me, so I interviewed the young woman. She was like 19 or whatever. And he said the bottom line was that she'd been working for a year for someone else. And for that entire year, she'd been sweeping the floor, folding towels, doing the laundry, stacking the dishwasher. But that was it. And, she had no training. She was just being treated old school, and unfortunately, this happens all over the world, that salon owners will employ someone and they really want someone to help be a trainee, an assistant, an apprentice, but it's got to be a two-way street. And what you might have got away with 10 years ago, today's workforce simply will not let you get away with that. And nor should they. And nor should you as a salon owner think that you can treat people like that simply because you can't afford to financially as much as anything else. You've got to get people productive. And so what he said to me was that, after he'd interviewed this young woman, that at the end of it, the mother had sat there, hadn't said anything. And then the girl's mother said to him, so let me ask you this, do you have a written training program for, all of your trainees, apprentices, so that they can see at what stage they'll be at in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, at what point they'll get on the floor, what further, expectations should they have about when they'll be developing their own clientele? What further educational opportunities are there? What marketing support does the salon do to help them build up a clientele of their own? Now, to be honest with you, my friend was a little bit outraged about that someone should be there asking him this. But, when I say he's my friend, he is my friend, but he's a coaching client of mine. And so we sort of, initially, I don't mind saying that I could sort of empathize with him a little bit. But then I said to him, look, I said, hey, if that was your daughter, how would you feel about she's gone for an apprenticeship and for a year, she hasn't been trained, she hasn't been taught anything, she's just being used as cheap labor. I said, the questions that young woman's mother asked are perfectly reasonable assumptions that you would have a written step-by-step training program, that there would be a plan to get people productive, that there would be certain items on the timeline that would be being ticked off, that they had passed this level, to cut hair, this level to do color, this level to do color correction, so that there was some logical progression, and then even some sort of marketing plan to get people busy. Now, the reality is that very few salons have anything like that. Very few salons really do have any systems and structure and training in place to take people on that journey. Very few salons have any sort of, induction program to say to them that, okay, this is where you are today, and this is where you'll be, this is what we'll cover in the next sort of 3 months. And then in the 3 months after that, this is what we'll cover. And in 9 months' time, this is what you should be expecting. This is what I will expect from you as a business. And this is what you can expect from me. And to have a training program, an education and plan like that, and a marketing plan in place to get people as productive as possible, I think it's not only a perfectly normal expectation for an employee, but I think from an employer's point of view, that it's essential, because you simply can't afford to have people not productive. And you can't just, you can't just churn through them and constantly be looking for a replacement. For example, the salon that young woman left. So she left there to go and work in this other salon. Why? Because she wasn't getting any training. She wasn't being shown the path. She wasn't excited and passionate about our industry, because our industry, or the salon owner, wasn't pouring back into her. So it has to be a two-way street. So, that's something that I'm sort of seeing everywhere, is that question of, but are you ready to take people on? Are you really ready? Because your job as a salon owner is to grow people, and that means that you need to pour into them. You need to be a leader. You need to pour into them. You need to grow them to be a valuable part of your team, your brand.
Gosh, there's so much that we could dive into, but I like how you brought up bringing up a 3, 6, 12 month, like give that person a vision of what's to coming, and then spelling out expectations. What are our expectations? What are your expectations? Is that something that can, in your opinion, be kind of personalized to each person? Is there a way to build the plane in the sky with this approach somehow for owners that are like, because I know owners who are probably listening thinking, you're right, I don't have my entire thing figured out, thought through, all that. And that can really be like, hold them up, paralysis by analysis, right? So what do you think is just the easiest way to start, feel confident about it, and give you enough kind of a grace area to fine tune your kind of onboarding program as you go?
Well, I think it differs from salon to salon and from individual to individual as to what they are already bringing to the table. But I think as a salon owner, that you should map out in your own mind what are the And we're not just talking technical and creative, we're also talking about the experience skills that people should bring. Now, when I say experience, I mean the customer service experience. So, for example, I went to a salon not that long ago, and I asked for, the young lady offered me a coffee. I said, yeah, I'd love a coffee. So she brought this coffee to me. And just before she put it down in front of me, it was on a saucer, a cup and a saucer. And a little bit of the coffee slopped out onto the saucer. And she just looked at me and smiled and went, whoops, and walked off. Now, I thought she'd walked off to get a napkin or get a replacement or something. But it was just, whoops, And, she's perfectly nice and charming young woman, but that just doesn't cut it for me, So whether we're talking about training in terms of what are your benchmarks, what are your, non-negotiables in terms of how do you greet a client? How do you escort a client around the salon? How do you, address a client? How do you do consultations? So right from the get-go, I think you need to say, this is our brand experience. These are the minimums that should happen when someone comes into our salon. Just like when you go into a Starbucks or a Apple store or a, fill in the blank. There is a proprietary way of doing things. And so as the salon owner, you're the leader. So you need to decide what is the brand standards in your business that you want to have as a guaranteed minimum. Now, we're not talking about turning people into robots. I'm saying very clearly that these are the guaranteed minimums. But in our industry, we're very much in the people business. We're very much about, giving people a bespoke, a customized, a personalized, relationship and brand experience. But there still needs to be, that sort of benchmark that runs through everything, from the customer service experience to building professional relationships, and then obviously onto the technical and creative and the product knowledge side of things. So, as a salon owner, as the leader, that is your job to put those landmarks in place. So when we start talking about the hair cutting side of it, for example, you might come up with, okay, these are the 7 fundamental haircuts that you need to master before you go on the floor in my salon, because I'm not going to give you clients if I don't think you have the skill level to do them. So, you might have just 7 different haircuts, whatever, long layers or, a one length bob, a graduated bob, a short basic layer, whatever it is. What are the things that are right for you in your business that you're going to say that this is, these are the looks that I need you to master before I can confidently, have you on the floor taking whatever is thrown at you in terms of clients. Now, likewise, in terms of haircuts, there's obviously going to be the same sort of parallels with color, that, there are certain techniques. So whether it's, balayage or foil highlights or right back to, simple tint regrowth application, that there's an obvious, you start here, and as your knowledge builds, your level of creativity and technical excellence builds with it as well. So as a salon owner, I think you should put together some sort of map of what these points look like. Now, then depending on the person who's sat in your chair when you're interviewing them for the position, they might have come straight out of beauty school. So you want to make sure that they have covered up on all of those things. So you might want them to do some practical assessments so that you can see, whether they're up to speed or not. Whereas if you've got someone who's maybe got a couple of years of experience, maybe they've already decided to specialize in one area or another. So as a cutter or as a colorist, or maybe they want to do both. But likewise, as a business owner, you still need to know, well, can I give everything to that person? Can I give them a bride for a hair up? Can I give them a gentleman's haircut with a skin fade? Can I give them, a balayage? You need to know what their skill levels are. And I think the only way really to do that is through some sort of, checklist or assessment, so that you can gauge a level of expertise, and therefore you can look at where the gaps are, and then what further training that you need to either give them, internally within the salon, or whether you're bringing in external people to train them, or sending them out for external training to sort of fill in the blanks. Because, as a salon owner, as the leader, it's your business. And if you don't do that, then no one else is going to do it for you.
I just am thinking, like, what was your Vidal Sassoon experience like? Because, and let me just tell you where my head is at.
Mm.
We used to train new hires for a long period of time because we had very high standards for the work
Mm.
that their technical work, right, that they would do. Now there's a push, let's get people, and this is what our new talent wants. They want to do hair as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And it's not even that we've lowered our standards, but some may say we have. It's actually that consumer expectations have gone up. So I feel for new talent, because when they get on the floor today, in today's culture, they can't get away with doing level 1 hair. They have to be doing like level 3 hair. They may not be a master yet, but they can't get away with that with consumers.
Mm.
So there's this interesting shift. We used to make you train for at least a year. Now you're 3 to 6 months, you're on the floor. You used to do better technical work. Now, not so
Mm.
much, but higher expectations are going to be put on you by the consumer more than the brand, probably.
Yeah.
And so, and not to mention the new expectation of being a content creator on your social media, whether you're
Mm.
new to the industry or not. So the stakes have risen really high. What's going to happen? Are we going to see a boomerang effect where we're going to have to increase the technical side of training yet again? Will we never go back to that, and just consumers will think they're getting really great things because it looks cool on social media? We've created trends that aren't really that technically challenging to produce. Like, I'm just thinking more about, you've been in this a long time. You've seen a lot of things.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on all of that?
Okay. With the big shift in my career is, which a 40-year career, is that there's been different decades where there's been different sort of hair. I actually was I was away recently on a shoot, and there was a great advertising campaign for Prada. And it was a picture of Emma Watson from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And she's got this nice short little croppy haircut. And we were talking about it at this hairdressing event that I was speaking at. And one of the salon owners came up to me and said to me, "Do you know what, Antony? I had someone come into the salon the other week with that picture of Emma Watson. I don't know if you're familiar with it, sort of
Yeah.
part of the latest Prada campaign. And she wanted a haircut like that. And none of
Mm.
her stylists were confident to do it. None of them. And as the salon owner was older, obviously, she said, we've got this generation of hairdressers now who are fantastic at balayage. They're really good at color. They're much better than my generation were when we were in their 20s. They're probably better at dressing hair, in a fairly narrow sort of description of what dressing hair means. They're better at dressing hair. They're definitely better at color and balayage as a generalization. But the salon owner was saying to me, "But Antony, they can't cut hair." She said, I will frequently get women coming into the salon that are slightly older, wanting a nice short little haircut, that they don't want long hair and beachy waves and balayage. And she said, "I'm really challenged in getting young hairdressers to do it." And so I think that's a real shame, that it's like that. But I think in varying degrees, every generation has their sort of, their thing that they focus on. My generation, we mentioned it, the Sassoon sort of era in the 80s. It was very much about short hair. So, if someone walked in the door of a Sassoon salon then or now with a picture of Emma Watson saying, I want my hair cut like this, that people would be queuing up to do it and they'd all be able to do a great job of it. So I think that there's often a lot of analogies with, if you look outside the hairdressing industry, if you look at the restaurant industry, you look at training to be a chef. I have a friend of mine who went to the Cordon Bleu cookery school in Paris. And she said to me, Antony, we spent 3 days learning how to boil an egg. And I was like, oh my God, how does it take 3 days to learn how to boil an egg? She said, I can't even begin to tell you. And so, I think that hairdressing is an industry where we often just focus on what's happening in the moment, in the current, and we don't always, and I was guilty of this as well. If you'd said to me in the 80s, Antony, you need to do a shampoo and set, you need to learn how to do finger waves or pin curls or whatever, I would have laughed at you. But everything comes around and cycles. And I think if you truly want to be a really competent hairdresser, if you look at some of the best hairdressers in the world, the big editorial hairdressers, whether it's, people like Guido or people like Garin, they can do anything. So you can say to them, I want to look like Princess Grace of Monaco, or I want to look like, the Emma Watson in the new Prada campaign, or I want a beehive. They can do anything because they are truly masters of the craft. But I think that as an industry everywhere, that too often hairdressers focus on what is the current thing, and they just focus on doing that and they don't move on. And the problem is, and it's the same for every generation, a new generation will come up behind you, and that new generation will not want what you're doing, and they will want something different. And it's a cyclical thing. And we've been in this era of long hair now for really all of this century. So 24 odd years. But it can't last forever. It just doesn't last forever. And sometimes, you'll often see there'll be an icon. There'll be a person like an Emma Watson, or I can remember, in the 90s, famous model Linda Evangelista. She had her haircut like a different haircut every time you saw her on the cover of Vogue or whatever, and it influenced so many people. So sometimes it's an actress, sometimes it's a model, sometimes it's a musician. Sometimes like Debbie Harry, Madonna. Sometimes an icon comes out that really represents the moment, and they have a huge impact on an entire generation. So whether it's that will shift it or something else that will shift it, all you can guarantee is that what fashion looks like today is not what it will look like in 10 years' time. And who knows what it will look like, but it's been long for a long time. And hey, I don't have a problem with that. My wife's got long hair. My daughters, I've got 2 daughters, they both got long hair. But as an industry, it's not going to stay like that forever. It never does. You only have to look back over, the last 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years, whatever. Hair changes. It's always changing. And the change at the moment has been more about color and the sort of the feel of it, but it won't stay like this forever. It's always moving and morphing into the next thing.
And so is business, which is sort of the fun of it as well. So, if we're going to kind of wrap things up, and if you're sharing just some final words of encouragement or wisdom with owners listening today who maybe need to rethink their onboarding process or put some more planning behind it, what would you want them to know or start with today?
Well, I think it starts with you, you meaning the salon owner, the manager, the leader. That too many times salon owners open up a business totally unprepared for the reality of what that means to be a manager, to be a leader, to be a marketeer, to be, someone who has all these different functions. So if you own a salon or open a salon or want to open a salon, do not underestimate the role of the management side of growing the business. Whether we're talking about the financial controls, the people management, the self-management of yourself and building and developing yourself as a leader, because Your business will only grow if you do. And as the leader and the manager, your ongoing education is the single most important thing you need to address. And because there's that expression that which I love, which is what got you here will not get you there, whatever there means to you. And so you need to keep growing because your business will be a reflection of you. And I don't know anyone that wants their business to stay the same. Everyone wants their business to evolve, to improve, to grow. So that would be my final words, my parting shot.
Ah, Antony, you're so great. I could just chat with you all day. And I really hope truly that someday we get to meet in person.
I will look forward to that,
But
Katie.
I do just thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom with all of us. For everybody
My
listening,
pleasure.
I have in our show notes for you to go and follow Antony on Instagram. We'll have a link to his website as well. So, yes, thank you, Antony.
Thanks, Katie. It's been great being here. So thank you very much. And yeah, been good having this opportunity to share some of my thoughts with your listeners.
Oh, it's been awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us here week after week. If you love this platform, we would appreciate you just taking a moment to leave us a positive review wherever you're listening so that more people like yourself will discover Beyond the Technique, where we are here to change the way that you are supported in your business. Until next time, everybody, have an awesome day and stay strong.